Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of Ville on the Ville, a full episode here on the YouTube channel. Thank you again for tuning in, all of you that do. A lot to talk about. Going to get out of the gate with the game that happened last night in Charlottesville. The Cardinals going to Virginia, a game that I touched on a couple days ago in a quick take. I was no longer going to watch games when Louisville played Virginia because it was so aggravating, but I was going to want to see what Louisville did with David Padgett at the helm. And they went in and battled Virginia right down to the wire. It looked as though a couple different times Virginia was going to do what they've always done to Louisville, just hit them with that run and pretty much put the game away, which for them usually means they get about a 10 to 14 point lead, and that's all she wrote. And they did get a double-digit lead, but Louisville stayed with it. There were a couple times you sensed they were getting frustrated, but they kind of reeled it in. They stopped taking quick shots, started running the offense a little bit more, got some stops, and were able to hit some shots on their own, get back in it. What I really liked right away is you could see there was a difference. David Padgett, I alluded to some things I thought might happen. I think we saw elements of those things, but right out of the gate what you saw, at least what I noticed, was Louisville moving the ball all over the place on offense to make that Virginia defense move around and shift and hopefully open up alleys, because this Louisville team, as we know, not great off the dribble, but what I think you saw David Padgett doing is saying, look, maybe we can't drive right on them one-on-one, but if we continue to make that defense move, maybe lanes will open up, and right out of the gate you saw that, the back-and-forth weave. I think a lot of times we see that weave from the Cardinals, and it's usually out towards midcourt. This was really close to right at the three-point line, and what I think he figured what happened was Virginia is so focused on the ball and where it is and where it's moving to, that defense gets focused on that, and that's when it shifts and moves and creates lanes. You saw that. Now, a few times early on, I think there were some fouls that weren't called, but that's just the nature of the beast with Virginia. They have that reputation. They play without fouling. I tweeted out several times, it's not that there's a difference between not fouling and not getting called for a foul. And this Virginia team, like an offensive lineman in football, they hold on a regular basis. They don't always get called for it. I think Virginia just does what they do really well. Hide those little things, do things away from the ball. What I also noticed, when they're on offense, they're also very physical. Running those cuts. Now, they work screens incredibly well. Guys without the ball, you saw Kyle Guy doing it, guys without the ball, literally, coming off those curl screens. And if you try to go underneath that, you just get pushed away. And what you'll notice, Virginia, and it's funny, if you look at what Tony Bennett does, he recruits and just brings in guys that fit his system, and that is big, girthy, stout guys. They've got some of these dudes, that's all they do is stand there and set screens on offense, Jack Salt being one of them. But what you'll notice, if you look closely, they do this little thing with their hips. They don't move their feet, but they use their width. They get in the way, and I think one time Ryan McMahon literally got knocked off his feet. He didn't fall down, but up into the air when one of the Virginia guys setting a screen just throws their hip out there, which is still not a legal screen, but they do it subtly, and basically it comes down to the fact these guys can be so big and they can just knock the offense or the defensive player out of the way with just a little movement. And they do that very well, and they do it away from the ball, and it just doesn't get seen. So those are things that I guess opposing coaches need to point out. Hey, they're running these, and maybe they do it. I know David Padgett several times was talking about, hey, my guys are getting hit on the arm, they're getting held, they're getting bumped. But again, you got to deal with what the referees are calling, and they let a lot of stuff go. I think Louisville defended cleaner than Virginia, but they probably got away with some contact as well. But when you break this game down, I love seeing what I saw from Louisville. We saw some high-low action. Malik Williams started, and I said I thought we'd see a lot more of Honest and Ray at the same time. We've been seeing a little bit more of that recently, but we did see that last night. Now, what's so frustrating to me with Honest is, and he's 60% of the way through his final season here at Louisville, so at this point, I can't imagine it's going to change. But if he would just get that ball, in, regardless of the situation, don't even think about it, go straight up to the basket and try to dunk it or go strong to the rim, he would benefit greatly either from made layups, dunks, or at least get to the free throw line, where I know he's not a great free throw shooter, but at least you put fouls on the other team, if anything, and thin them down maybe later in the game. But early on, Honest got 3 or 4 opportunities in the post where Louisville got some great lanes opened up, got the ball to him, and on a couple of those occasions, there wasn't even a defender there that could have stopped him if he had gone straight up. But I think he gets to where he just anticipates contact, even if he doesn't know there's somebody there or not, and he just kind of goes up tentatively or fades away and doesn't really go strong right at the basket. Had he done that, they probably have 4 to 6 more points in that first half. And against Virginia, that's a huge difference, especially when you look at the way that first half finished. Louisville had pushed out to a 2-point lead. I took a picture of it because I almost couldn't believe what I was seeing. 4 minutes to go in the first half. They went up 23-21. Last 4 minutes, though, Virginia hit Louisville, one of those little mini runs that they have, and took that 6-point lead into the locker room. Imagine if Honest had finished those 3 or 4 shots in the post that he had, that game probably would have been tied at the half. Or who knows, maybe Louisville has the lead. So those little things, boy, if we could see that from Honest down the stretch, but at this point, you're tired of asking for it. If you haven't gotten it by now, you're probably just not going to get it. But down the stretch, I mean, when you look at the numbers from this game, if you'd have shown me the box score from Louisville, just Louisville, I would have said, man, 64 points, shot the ball well, rebounded the ball pretty well. They got a chance to win this game. Have you just showed me Virginia's box score, I would have said, okay, I'm not going to watch that game because they're going to win by at least 20, if not 30 points, shooting the ball the way they did, taking care of the ball the way they did. That's a recipe for scoring 74 points for Virginia. That's a recipe for disaster if you're any opponent, you would think. So the fact that this was just a 10-point game and Louisville had faced a 5-point deficit and had the ball late with just a few minutes to go right there in it, and boy, you wish you could have that moment in the game back. Denny Crum used to always say, there's a reason you're open. When they let Ray Spalding shoot that 3, he thought about it. They backed off and said, oh, you want to shoot that? Go ahead. Took it. Probably not the best shot. I mean, you can't blame him all that much. Really thought that could have been a big shot if he had made it. But in those cases, you just got to learn to work and get the ball to the guy who needs to be taking that shot. If you're in the post, you're the guy, Ray. But if you're on the perimeter and you're wide open and they're not closing out on you, they want you to shoot the ball. He took probably an ill-advised shot there at a very pivotal moment. Things kind of went away from that point on. Virginia pulled away, got the win. Deceptive 10 points. I mean, I know they controlled much of the second half, but boy, the Cardinals put a scare in him. Ryan McMahon, you wish you would have seen him get a couple more opportunities. Both Deng Adele and then the moment I mentioned with Ray just a second ago probably could have worked the ball to Ryan McMahon for a spot-up 3. That's the guy. If he can catch and shoot, there's not another guy on the team you'd rather take it than Ryan McMahon, especially considering he'd already hit a couple. So those moments in the game you'd like to get back, but I don't think there's any question when you look at the way Virginia played, Louisville's right there in it. I think they grew up last night in Charlottesville. Hopefully they'll learn from this, those mistakes they made in those key situations. Careless mistakes. Yes, Virginia forces turnovers. They play great defense, but they're about half of Louisville's turnovers that led to several points for Virginia. Unforced errors, throwing the ball in the backcourt, throwing a loose pass to the post, out of bounds. Take care of those mistakes. And again, all those little things add up. And in a game like this, they become huge down the stretch. But all in all, I don't think anybody is really all that upset from what we saw based on what we're used to seeing against Virginia. So I think it's an encouraging sign moving forward. So they now have to move and look forward to, it's now February, and I've spoken to several weeks ago, back in December even, I was not going to really analyze this team, give an opinion of this team until we got to this point in the season. And I literally said, February 1st, I'm not really putting any sort of expectation on this team until we get to this point, just because there's so many things that they've been dealing with. New guys on the team, the new coaching staff, even the experienced guys, Quentin, Honest, Deng, Ray. All this newness has to work together, and I think it's going to take them a little bit longer than normal, and I think it has. But now that we're at February 1st, I don't think there's any question this team can play with anybody in the country. Now, does this mean they're going to make a run to the Final Four? Absolutely not, because there are also times they can drop a game to anyone in the country. But I think from what we saw over the past few weeks, they are not letting teams hit them and knock them out like we saw in Rupp Arena. We've seen a team now that has resiliency, that can fight back. there's not a tougher environment and a tougher defense you're going to play than what they saw in Charlottesville, and they did it there. That is a very good sign moving forward. So now, moving forward as far as the schedule is concerned, it's a mixed bag, and really these next 4 or 5 games, critical. Number one, because 4 of them are at home, and they're also most of them against teams you would expect Louisville, at least at this point from what we've seen, to win these games. You've got Pittsburgh on the road as the only road game, and then you have this weekend Florida State, Syracuse, a depleted Syracuse team next week. So games that they can win. Georgia Tech in there. And if we take a closer look at the schedule, you'll see, like I said, Florida State this week, and then Syracuse, then Georgia Tech, then they go to Pitt, and then return home against North Carolina. So honestly, looking at that schedule, I think we should all say a worst-case scenario is 4-1, and really, if they really want to set themselves up for a strong finish, a good seed in the NCAA tournament, you almost want to feel like they need to win all 5 of these games, because that mixed bag I referred to, that closing stretch is absolutely brutal. The fact that you've got good teams, 3 of those on the road, at Duke, at Virginia Tech, at NC State. Your only 2 home games are Carolina and Virginia. That is a gauntlet. That's like, if that was an NCAA tournament run, that would be tough to get through and navigate. Louisville's got to face that to finish the season leading into the ACC tournament. So that's why these next 4 games, you really would like to see them get through all those unscathed, put them in a very good position to maybe finish, steal a couple games you might not expect them to win, like Virginia at home, at Duke. You steal 1 or 2 of those, and suddenly, I don't think anybody's catching Virginia at this point, but man, if you can sneak up there into a top 2 or 3 seed, or at least get a double bye once again in that ACC tournament, that might set you up pretty well moving forward. Now, something that Mike Rutherford tweeted the other day is how crazy this ACC tournament could be setting up, because you've got really, I think, Virginia, and still, even though with 3 losses, Duke, probably still the teams that have separated themselves at the top of the conference. And then from really 3 down through 10 or 11, you're going to have teams that it's basically just a coin toss. And then I read that, and he said how crazy that group of teams is going to be. You think about Notre Dame and where they're going to fall. They're probably going to be in the lower half of the conference, if not lower third. But come ACC tournament time, Matt Farrell, he was out once again. He's probably going to be back. And Bonzie Colson, yeah, he comes back. Could you imagine being the higher-seeded ACC team that gets to face full-strength Notre Dame? I'm starting to have this fear that that's going to end up being Louisville if they get a double bye. We've seen a crazy situation the first 2 years Louisville's played in the ACC tournament. They sat out the one, obviously. They've earned that double bye, and the reward has been playing Carolina and Duke. Well, you'd think that those 2 teams would be earning double byes themselves, but no, they haven't. Louisville's faced them and lost in their only ACC tournament game in those years. So you can imagine now if they earn another double bye and Notre Dame comes in their full strength and comes up, and that will be the first team they played. Wouldn't put that past anything at this point. So moving forward, though, let's move these next 4 games. If the Cardinals can get through them 4-0, really sets them up good for a strong finish. And that will start this Saturday, 4 o'clock in the Yum Center. The Florida State Seminoles come limping into town off a loss at Wake Forest, the team Louisville had just whipped last weekend. Of course, it was in Wake, in Winston-Salem, but the Seminoles already had revenge on their mind after the Cardinals knocked them off and broke that 28-game home winning streak. Now they're going to come in here off another loss. Now, I think Louisville's a very confident team right now, despite the fact they lost to Virginia, played well, right there with one of the best teams in the country. So I think we're going to see what sort of maturity, how this team has grown facing this Florida State team. So get out there to the Yum, because this starts a stretch of pivotal games. We enter Pod 4. Hopefully it can be a perfect one once again and keep them up in the top 4 in the conference standings moving forward. So Florida State is next up, and then it's Syracuse after that. So 2 very winnable games. Let's take them one at a time and see how things go. Now, moving on to the women, they are also in Virginia. Tonight, they play the women there in Charlottesville. Kind of odd. A matchup of 2 teams at the top of the conference standings. Virginia's kind of an unusual situation now for the women's team. They are 8-1 in the ACC, but they have yet to play the other three teams that are at the top. They have not played Louisville, Notre Dame, or Florida State, so they've been the beneficiary of a lighter conference schedule, and they've taken advantage of it. So they sit at the top of the standings, and now they get Louisville at home. So we'll see how the Cardinals go in there tonight. If they win this game, puts them in firm control of the ACC based on what happened last weekend. Talked about last week, there was a big game between Florida State and Notre Dame down in Tallahassee. Notre Dame went down there and just obliterated the Seminoles to the tune of 100-69, a game that looked a lot like what Louisville did to Notre Dame here, and it's crazy. I tweeted out how crazy that round robin was between Louisville, Notre Dame, and Florida State. Those women's teams all beat each other. Louisville destroying Notre Dame, 167. Then Louisville loses a low-scoring game by 1 to Florida State, and then Notre Dame goes to Florida State and obliterates them 100-69. But that was great. That's what we wanted for the the women's basketball team. They now, with that win, Notre Dame over Florida State, that gave the Seminoles their second loss because they had already lost to Syracuse earlier in the year. So now Louisville is tied with Notre Dame but has that tiebreaker over them. If they can beat Virginia tonight, that gives them the tiebreaker over both of those teams. And then it would be just them and Notre Dame at the top. So a huge game tonight in Charlottesville. So let's see how the women do. And if we look at the standings, as far as they're concerned, right now, again, they sit at the top. Virginia's right there with them at 8-1, as well as Notre Dame. But like I said, Louisville gets that win over Virginia. That knocks them down to 8-2 and puts Louisville and Notre Dame there at the top. So then it's just a matter of holding serve from here out, and you're the 1 seed in the ACC tournament. So a huge game tonight for the women. You win it, and again, you're in control of everything from here on out. And you would think most of the games down the stretch, as we look at the women's schedule, of course, they have the non-conference game against UConn coming up. But after Virginia, they go to Syracuse. Now, Syracuse, capable of beating good teams. They beat Florida State up there. And if I remember correctly, it was a double-digit win. So Syracuse can jump up and bite you. The women went up there, I think, won pretty convincingly last year. But I think Syracuse is a capable team. That might be the toughest game left in conference once they get by Virginia tonight. But they do have to go to BC, go to Carolina, who can also do some things, host Virginia, and then finish up with Pittsburgh. But really, tonight's game gets them going. They can get through that, puts them in firm control moving forward. And, of course, that non-conference game up at UConn, kind of a toss-up at this point. We'll see how that goes. After the loss to Florida State, the UConn game, win or lose, we'll see, being that it's up there, I'm almost one that says just play a good game. Don't get embarrassed, if you will. Show that you can compete with them because hopefully down the road they'll play again. I'd rather win that second matchup than the first one here in the regular season. But a long way to go. And really, at this point, conference games probably more important. So let's see if the Cardinals can get through that. But it starts tonight in Charlottesville as they take on the Cavaliers, and hopefully they can bring home the win there and really put them in firm control of things in the ACC moving forward. A couple other notes. There was a hiring by the football defensive coordinator. They hired Brian Van Gorder earlier this week. There was some information that leaked out over the weekend that alluded to he would be hired. There was some immediate reaction from a lot of fans, as we tend to do on Twitter, the 10-second summary and reaction. We get our feelings out there. I know the guy's been fired from some jobs, and recently he hasn't had as great a reputation. But let's be honest, compared to what we were hiring last year at this time, a lot more on that resume that shows, hey, this guy's been at big programs. He has performed well. He's a former Broyles Award winner for a top assistant. So he's done good at a very high level. So I think it's really, we should all just give this guy a chance, see what he can do. I like his energy. I think we're going to see more of a Todd Grantham approach with the defense, probably a little more complicated. So the defensive players need to be ready to study and understand what they need to be doing. But I think it's going to be more aggressive, and I like that. If you're going to give up a big play, at least every now and then get some turnovers from pressure. And that's what we had been missing from this Louisville defense, what we saw a lot with Todd Grantham. You might give up the big play, but they would also force a lot of turnovers. I at least want to see that, especially if you have an offense that can get things done. If the defense can get turnovers, give them some opportunities for short fields, kind of feeds into that offense as well. So I don't mind the hire, kind of excited. I want to give the guy a chance, see what he can do. So let's all kind of do that as Louisville fans and see, we're Louisville football. It's not like we can just pick and choose whoever we want. I think we at least need to understand, hey, this guy at least brings a little more to the table than we saw last year when Peter Sirmon was brought in. So I am interested to see how things will move forward. Now, the pinch here is hiring Van Gorder as late as they did. The next little bit of information here. Next week is National Signing Day, and they asked Brian Van Gorder at the press conference, how much are you going to be able to do as far as talking to players, talking to recruits, getting them in here, maybe signing some guys? And he's like, I really am not going to be able to do anything at all at this point. We just have a few days left before signing day. So that's going to fall back on the other coaches and assistants to get those guys in here. Really, this National Signing Day used to be the big holiday for a lot of fans. The big signing day where all the signatures were sent in, the fax machines were working. But now with the earlier signing day that they just started this past December, this one has lost a lot of the luster. And it's interesting because Bobby Petrino's initial reaction to having the early signing day wasn't positive. He wasn't a big fan of it. He preferred being able to go out and recruit late, get into guys' homes late, and then sign them on the traditional early February National Signing Day. But judging from that first class that he signed back in December, you think he might be changing his tune a little bit. Now, the drawback to this, at least as far as a student athlete is concerned, you have coaching changes that take place between the time you sign early and then end up getting to school, and that has impacted Louisville recruits. You saw, obviously, Peter Sirmon resign. Cord Dennison moves on to another job out at Oregon. He was a huge recruiter. A guy a lot of people said was the reason some of these guys were going to be coming to Louisville. They've already signed on the dotted line. They are now coming here, maybe not having that guy that they had hoped to, play under here at Louisville. So that's a drawback of this, and that's the nature of college athletics in this day and age. When you have these signings, it can be tough on some of these recruits, but everybody has to deal with it. So we'll see moving forward if this signing day, the early signing day, continues to be as prominent, or if players start to say, wait, I want to kind of see what things look like on that second final signing day in February before I really decide where I'm going to go. Because if any changes take place, I don't want those to impact me negatively. So National Signing Day, February 7th, next Wednesday. And again, as far as big names, I've said before, I'm not a huge recruiting guy. There are plenty of guys out there who kill it on the recruiting trail. You'll see them on Twitter, on different on websites. So they're the ones to look to for the detailed information. I haven't seen that Louisville has any big names in mind, but signing day is always good for some surprises. So hopefully the Cardinals can do that, pull a few rabbits out of the hat, if you will, next Wednesday on the 7th for National Signing Day for the Cardinals and rest of college football. That's going to wrap it up for today's episode of Ville on the Ville. I appreciate everybody watching. And until next time, as always, go Cards.